Get excited.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come up with a backup chant. Get you all pumped up before our webinars. Is that your gold star sticker for doing a good job? Okay, you guys ready if I hit it live?
Yep.
All right. Have a good one. Okay, well, welcome and thanks for joining us for our Global Data Vault webinar, our February webinar. Happy you all are here. I'm Trista Perot, Director of Global Data Vault, kicking off this next episode in our series that takes us back to the basics with a topic that's pretty important: how to verify if your backups are working. So let's get on into this. Not to spoil the movie ending here, but the common theme you're going to see again throughout the presentation is the need to test, monitor, and test again. Although we do realize that's easier said than done. So today our team will walk you through the different types of backups, different restore types, talk about Veeam Sure Backup, and offer some tips and best practices for healthy backups. So a little housekeeping: if you need to leave early or you want to watch the replay, the whole webinar will be available right away on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. But it will be available with a sort of condensed transcript in the next couple of days on our website. So be sure and grab that if you're interested. And so with that, let me get out of the way and introduce our team. Invisible, but moderating the session and available to answer questions in chat, we have both Brian Brignac and Leslie Ferris from our sales department. And as for our speakers today, we have Kelly Caldwell, who's our service delivery manager, and Stephen New, our operations director. Kelly, take it away.
Cool. So like Trista said, we're here today to talk about testing backups, and it's sort of important to understand the types of backups that there are. We normally see full and incrementals. The differentials are sort of a legacy backup type. So what the full is, obviously, it's everything front to back. In Veeam speak, it's what we call the VBK. That would be, you get all of the data first time through. Then we talk about incrementals. Incrementals are the bits of data, the blocks of data that have changed since the last time we took a backup, becoming pretty space efficient. And the differentials that aren't really used anymore are sort of what has changed since the last full backup. That was really made for more of a tape storage system. So it's not really as good for disk to disk backups like Veeam uses. So we're primarily going to focus on full and incrementals today, but those are the primary types of backups that you'll see in the environment. So what happens if your backup is bad? Now, obviously, nothing. If you lose data, you're not going to be able to restore it. Any applications, files, spreadsheets, anything like that. The bigger thing is you're not going to be able to recover your environments. Your servers, your virtual machines are not going to be available for you in the event of a disaster or loss. And then again, if you lose your primary infrastructure, primary storage, your primary data, you're not going to have any way to recover it. And you're going to hear a recurring theme here today about, there's one type of restore, which is being able to restore a file. It's completely different from being able to recover an entire server, an entire virtual machine from a backup. And that's something that we're going to reiterate today. So don't just assume that because you can restore something from backup, that means your backup is good. Stephen, why don't you walk us through the different types of restore types, and knowing that some of these are kind of Veeam specific and some are more general.
Yeah. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to try to instant recover your VM or your virtual machine. The reason for this is because sometimes you'll see Windows updates that could cause a machine not to boot. So you do want to instant recover that into your hypervisor to verify that your machine does boot, or at least until you get a control delete screen. Another suggestion is make sure you do not name it the same as your production VM. The reason for this is because it will overwrite the data that is in your data store or at least overwrite the name. So you always want to name it something like machine name underscore restore or something in that nature. That way you know that it is a restored machine. Um, you also want to try to restore your entire VM. The reason why this is important and the difference between this and an instant recovery is the restore entire VM is meant for servers that have lower SLAs. And the reason for that is because the RTO or restore time objective is actually much longer for these restore entire VMs because it actually restores the whole VM to your data store and or your hypervisor. So these are more for less critical VMs. Maybe you have a server that is maybe an RDS server, something that's less critical, that does not need that 15-minute or less RTO. You can do a restore entire VM. Make sure that you leave the networking disabled anytime that you do these instant recoveries or restore entire VMs. The reason for this is because it will pull the same IP and you could get an IP conflict if you do accidentally choose to power the VM on after the restore and or connect the networking. The last option is do a simple file level restore. That verifies your chain. If the data come out and if you can see the directory structure, more than likely is that chain is good. Um, it doesn't take the software aspect into place because you're not actually booting that machine up. So you do want to boot it up to verify that you do boot to control delete screen. But something simple as a file level restore, maybe restore the document off your desktop, maybe an Excel document or a Word document. Just do a simple restore and restore back to a location on your computer to verify that the data does restore properly.
Let's talk a little bit about Veeam Sure Backup. Now, this is a product that Veeam has. It's a feature of Veeam Backup and Replication, and basically what it is a lab. You create a lab in your VMware environment for this to run. It runs just like another job. And what it does is it takes that instant VM recovery process and mounts a virtual machine or an application group, a set of virtual machines in a private network that's created and allows you to test them. So it does mimic a DR test, but it gives you a couple of options. One, you have a lab environment available, so you can test things against real production data. It's exact copy of what you have running in production. So if you wanted to go test patches or software upgrades or anything like that, you can do that using this tool. It also verifies that you can recover that entire server from the backup. So like Steven said, sure, you can restore a file, but it doesn't mean that your operating system will boot. This will give you the warm fuzzies, if you will, about that virtual machine being able to boot from the backup file, meaning you can completely recover that. Sure Backup can be scheduled to run on a per day basis. It can be scheduled to run after other jobs complete, weekly, whatever you choose. And it'll give you a ping, a heartbeat. You can run some application scripts against it or test certain ports that you need to see if they're open or not. But one other neat thing is that you can schedule malware or antivirus scans to run in this process. You can run scripts or anything that you need to do to go in and look for malware. It's pretty good to have because you're actually looking in your backups. We've had some customers who have had ransomware that have not used this particular feature, but we've brought them up in a disconnected state where they were able to go in and run malware. So giving you that ability to do on your backups is pretty cool. Now, I will note that this is solely a customer side thing. This isn't something that GDV can run on our side because it's limited to the certain type of install that we have. And it would be pretty difficult for us to run this against 10,000 virtual machines on any regular schedule. But it is a good option for customers and end users. Monitoring quality, Stephen, we pride ourselves on quality of data and our monitoring here. Can you walk us through what that means?
So yeah, first of all, we're going to stress that existence of backups is not enough. Knowing that you have those backups in place is not enough to ensure that you can successfully recover. You do need continuous monitoring in place to verify that you don't have any failed jobs, to make sure that the backups are running properly. And you also need to make sure that your servers are patched and up to date. Normally, your provider, Global Data Vault, does send out a status report every morning, and we do also provide a real life quality portal. And what I mean by real life quality portal is it's current current data. So this is the current status via our quality portal on your GDV backups here. We also do send a status report every morning to all of our customers. Another thing that I would suggest is if you don't already have it, inside Veeam, you can actually configure notification emails that will email you, your team, or any distribution groups if your backups fail or give warnings. You can also set the successfuls as well. That way, you know if your backups are successful. But it's very important that you monitor these emails and make sure that they don't go to spam or you're not foldering these emails, because these are very important to the quality of your backups and or if you are able to restore. Now, Veeam also does have a RPO monitor, which if your restore point objective does not fall within the last 4 hours or 8 hours, this is only available for immediate mode or mirror mode. But they do have a RPO monitor that is part of the notifications, and it will send you an email if your RPO is older than 8 hours, older than 4 hours, which is also another helpful feature as well.
Yeah, now we're going to have a whole webinar, we think, on Veeam One and what a cool tool that is. But from a backup perspective, it can't test your backups, but it definitely can help you monitor them a little bit more thoroughly than Veeam Backup and Replication by itself. It gives you some additional reports, some alerts and notifications that Veeam Backup and Replication might not give you out of the box, or maybe you want a little bit more granularity on that. And we'll make sure that we cover that in our Veeam One webinar, but it's something else that you can use, another tool that we can help you with. But Stephen, let's talk about testing. Now, here we do an annual hands-on DR test. What does that look like on our side and for our customers?
So during the annual hands-on test, what we do is we spin up all the virtual machines that are business critical to the customer's environment. And we do also provide a VPN to allow the customer to go in, and I'm going to call it kick the tires of the test. Make sure all of your servers are communicating, make sure they're all functioning, make sure any applications are working. If you want to test your accounting software, please test it during your annual hands-on test. We want to make sure that everything that you would do in production is basically duplicated during this test, so that everything you expect to function is functioning. The last thing that anybody wants to do is go into a real live event and find out that their accounting software doesn't work. So during these annual hands-on tests, please test everything that you would use during your normal business day to verify that everything is working properly. Also, we suggest that you make no changes prior to the test. This is important because let's say that you patch a VM 1 week to the test, or you make a software change and that replicates to the Global Data Vault side, and you find out later that that patch actually broke some software in your environment. Keep in mind that would replicate to the Global Data Vault side. So we want to make sure that there's no changes. I would suggest a week prior to the test, put a stop change in place, make sure that no changes are made. Also, document any issues that you have. If you have any issues regarding a port need to be open, or you notice the DNS isn't working for this one server, this application was opening slow, make documentation of this during your test. And then follow up with your provider. Maybe the provider saw something on their side that they need to follow up with you on. Like maybe your default RDP port was changed to a different port that's non-standard, so we couldn't access the RDP session during our test. Any other issues regarding performance, just make sure that you follow up with your provider and say, hey, did you see any issues on your side? and we will be more than happy to provide you with the details we saw. Maybe a server had 8 gigs of RAM and we requested that it needs 16. Sometimes we run into an issue where the CPUs are under provision, so we have to bump the CPUs up for this server. That's important to follow up with, because maybe you want to make these changes in the production environment as well to speed up performance on your side. The next thing that we would suggest is always follow best practices. One of the things that we will suggest is that you have a BCDR, business continuity disaster recovery plan, in place. And also, it's not on the slide, but also any BIAs, business impact analysis, that need to be done on what critical servers need to be brought up, what is critical to your business on functioning, who is actually impacted, who would need access. All this stuff needs to be created prior to the actual DR test. And then also regular testing of your local backups. I mentioned that what you do locally is sent to the Global Data Vault side. So if your local backup is not working, more than likely that's going to be replicated to the GDV side. So we need to make sure that your local backups, by testing your local backups, by doing those instant recoveries, changing the name to _restored or something to indicate it's not the production VM, make sure it boots into Windows, do the file level restore test. During our first side, you notice that we put test 2 times. We can't stress that enough. Test your local backups to make sure that they are functioning properly.
Yeah, that's important stuff. And we always want to follow the ITIL framework for people, process, and technology. Make sure that you have the people available that need to assist with the testing. Make sure you have your processes down, documented. And it's okay if you stumble during your test. That's what the test is for. If you find a process that doesn't work or that needs to be updated, or something has changed, that's the appropriate time to find it, not when you're in the middle of a crisis. We do have a webinar about how to do a DR test or create a DR plan, and it does talk about the business impact analysis and things like that Stephen mentioned. We have the doc that you can download here. I think Trista was going to put that in chat for us as well, but you can find it on our blogs on globaldatavault.com. But just remember, when you have this test come up, treat it seriously, because it could be the only time during that year to actually do a full-blown test and get everybody involved. So it's pretty important. All right. So tips. We've talked about testing and best practices. One of the things that I used to observe, and I've been doing this a while, back in the day, it was hard. I mean, like 15, 20 years ago, to test backups was extremely difficult. You had to have hardware that was similar to, if not an exact match of what you were restoring. We do bare metal testing. It took a really long time, and we were using tapes. So if the tape failed, you had to start all over, or if the restore failed, you had to start all over. And this wasn't like this wasn't a 5-minute process. This you'd be 6, 7, 8 hours into a restore and it would fail. And so you'd have to start over. Those days are gone now for the most part. And with virtualization, it makes it so easy to test your backups, because you don't have you don't rely on any type of hardware. You don't have any location or geographic specific things preventing you from doing the tests. It's virtualization, so you can literally test them wherever you have hypervisors and storage. But the complacency is what'll get you. Just thinking that everything's okay, you haven't had any errors, you don't have time to do it, nothing's going to happen to you. In the past 2 years, we have seen an escalating number of ransomware attacks. We've had a lot of natural disasters, a lot more than we normally see, and we don't think those things are going to quiet down. So it's really important that you not be complacent. Much like cybersecurity, be vigilant with what you're doing with your testing, with your DR testing, and stay on top of it. Stephen mentioned that patching is critical. The flip side of that is when you start to do these DR and you get into a DR scenario, if you haven't patched your servers and rebooted your servers recently, whenever you do a restore or an instant VM recovery, those machines are going to start. And when they boot, they're going to say, oh, I have Windows updates that I still have to apply. and it can take an hour or more for them to sit there and install all of those pending Windows Update. So that's another reason to make sure that your Windows servers are patched frequently and rebooted. The other thing is, some best practices when you're provisioning your backup jobs. Stephen, can you tell us what that means, like from a backup job perspective?
Sure. You always want to keep your job size within a reasonable level. Best practices is to keep those job size under 10 terabytes with the VBK and the VIB, so the entire chain. You also want to make sure that you limit your number of VMs per job. We recommend that you use around 30 VMs per job, and that is best practices. And then also disk size on the local machine is important. The reason why that is important is if you do have a 40 terabyte disk attached as a VMDK or a VHDX, or if you do have that 30 terabyte disk, keep in mind that's only going to compress down to about 15 terabytes with the 2.1 times compression. So with dedupe, you're probably going to get probably about a 15 terabyte VBK. And keep in, when Veeam does mount the data, it does have to mount back to your VBK. It has to mount the chain. So those restore times, the RTOs do increase when you do have those larger disks. If you do need the 20 terabyte disk volume, 30 terabyte, I would suggest that you add the disk as smaller volumes. That way you keep it under the 10 terabyte chain limit, so that it doesn't take 7 minutes to mount or 10 minutes to mount. So that is recommended to keep those disk size on the local machines under really 10 terabytes. So those are the actual best practices on the Veeam side.
Great. So, we're all about backups, but the backup is only as good as it is. We've long preached, and I personally have, you can't rely on a successful status email. That's kind of like just sending the mail. The mail is even more reliable than that, because if you send your mail, it's pretty much going to get delivered. But if you're just relying on a successful backup email or an alert, that's not really a good thing to do. So make sure that you're testing those, make sure that you're verifying that you can actually recover anything and everything that you need in the way that you need it from your backup files, whether it's the entire virtual machine, application items, a database, a spreadsheet, etc. Make sure you're monitoring your backups, because you still do want to know if you're having errors or if they're completing. Obviously, it's one thing to get a successful email that you have issues on. It's something completely different to get a failure and then to have multiple failures and never do anything about it. Like Stephen mentioned, foldering alerts or not paying attention to your monitors of your backups, you let that go, it can turn around to bite you. So test, and test. And I think that's what we wanted to cover today, was how to test your backups and why. So we are a fully managed backup as a service, DR as a service, and O365 backup shop. We support VMware Hyper-V, Acropolis, and physical devices, servers and endpoints. And we really focus on quality, like Stephen said. We want to talk about SLAs, about your backups versus success or not, and we want to help you implement disaster recovery as a service successfully. So I'll turn it back over to Trista.
Okay, that was great, guys. We do have a few questions. One of them from chat is, will testing Sure Backup affect our network latency?
No, testing Sure Backup should not. I'm going to say will not. It should not affect your network latency. All that it does is creates a DV switch, a distributed virtual switch, and inside vCenter, and or if you create one in Hyper-V, it creates a switch in Hyper-V. So that should not affect your network latency. Your local network should be able to handle that.
Yeah, it'll affect your host resources. So it does have to use the CPU and memory and things like that on one of your hypervisor hosts. So it can impact that, and just be careful, where you spin those things up.
I think a follow-up to that is, how long can we test for?
Talking about a DR test, or?
So a
Yeah.
DR test you can test for roughly a week. And the reason for that is because we do want to go ahead and we want to go ahead and give you sufficient time to test everything that you can test. We normally leave the DR test up for 1 week.
Here's another testing question. Is there a specific set of data that you test from?
That's a good question. So yes, we do test from the customer's EDP or enhanced data protection. And the reason for that is because we get two benefits from that. First of all, we test the customer's enhanced data protection to verify it functions. And then we also get the customer a DR test. So we get two wins out of that situation by testing the functionality of the EDP data as well as performing the test. So we do that from the enhanced data protection.
There's a follow-up question to this. Will the customer continue to back up daily while testing? So again, that's sort of the answer to both is yes, but if we're doing it from enhanced data protection, we leave what we call your cloud tenant repository. We leave everything in there untouched. If you don't have enhanced data protection, we have to build it from the data in that repository, which locks files and means that your backups can't merge. So you can still continue sending your backups, but they're not going to merge and could create some issues down the road with your incrementals and whatnot.
Another question is, how do you get EDP?
Call us.
Enhanced data protection.
Yeah, reach out to your sales rep. They'll go ahead and work with the operations team to go ahead and get that enabled for you. But anybody who does not have EDP, we would highly suggest that you add it. And the reason for that is because of the increased amount of ransomware activity that we have. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and reach out to sales@globaldatavault.com, go ahead and get that added. We can go ahead and work that out with you.
Okay, I have one last question here, unless any more show up in the countdown. How is Veeam One licensed?
Veeam One is licensed per instance, and an instance is just a virtual machine. So if you have 100 VMs in your environment, you need 100 instances of Veeam One. Pretty simple.
Okay. Going, gone. Okay, well, we don't have any other questions, but if you think of something as soon as this webinar ends, you can shoot that over to sales@globaldatavault.com or Stephen N@globaldatavault.com or Kay Caldwell@globaldatavault.com. And I think that's on the closing slide here. Did want to let you all know that our next webinar will be March 15th, and we have a very special guest from Veeam. So be on the lookout for notification on that. And again, if you want to watch this on replay, it'll be on both our YouTube channel and our Facebook page and our website with a condensed transcript in a couple of days. So be sure and follow globaldatavault.com on all your social media. And we appreciate you so much